Hello and a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Bolden Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you on the Monday after the NFL draft. Obviously, a great weekend for the NFL because I'm pretty sure the ratings that are going to come in are going to be absolutely incredible because they always seem to be, just for the fact of someone reading names off a piece of paper. It seems to always get incredible TV ratings. The city of Detroit, shout out to them for turning out with what has been reported as the best attended NFL draft, and not even just beating the record by a country mile. I've seen some figures say that 775,000 people attended the draft. And, kudos to the NFL for turning this into the travelling road show that it was and giving all these communities and these cities a chance to experience. They may not get Super Bowls. I know Detroit has had one. There's going to be Green Bay next year. I know there's always concerns about Green Bay getting a Super Bowl because of how small it is and, could they have the hotel room? But if they don't get a Super Bowl, having something like the draft as the equivalent is pretty spectacular. And Detroit showed out. So shout out to them. And as I say, just a great weekend all around. I know my Pittsburgh Steelers did a very, very good job in their drafting, not just with round 1, but also rounds 2 to 7, odd days 2 and 3. So I'm very happy. I'm pretty sure there are other fan bases out there that are equally as happy with how their business went down. And there may be some fan bases out there that probably aren't a little bit too happy. And we are going to, of course, be talking about them with the first topic of the show. And there's no surprises. It was in my bonus episode, but more news is coming out. It is going to be about the Atlanta Falcons and the story of the draft, of the whole Michael Penix Jr., Kirk Cousins dynamic and how that is going to work out. But before we do that, there is, of course, the admin, which is to say thank you very much for listening. As I say every week, if you are new, then feel free to like and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this on. And if you are a returning listener, then thank you very much for your continued support. And yeah, thanks very much for tuning in and making me part of your week every single week. So without further ado, let's get into the first topic. And it's the same topic, and it's the biggest topic that has come out of this draft weekend. And of course, it's the Atlanta Falcons, who seem to be doing their absolute best to try and double down on their decision to take Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington, when they already have Kirk Cousins tied down to a long-term contract. And as I said on Friday, if this was a short-term deal with Kirk Cousins, if this was a one-year bridge quarterback, then you could understand taking Michael Penix Jr. to sit and learn and develop under an established veteran. Similar to what the New York Jets were trying to do with Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, 2-year deal, fine. You can understand sitting for 2 years. You get that. But when you give Kirk Cousins a 4-year deal, $180 million with $100 million of it guaranteed, you are saying that is the future of your franchise. Again, Kirk Cousins is certainly no spring chicken. He is 35 years old, but given how healthy has been for the most part in his career. Obviously, his season curtailed last year because of injury, but for the most part, he's been a very healthy person. So it's not impossible for him to play until he's 39, maybe even going on further. We've seen that is now maybe the expectation for quarterbacks is to play till they're 40 now, with Brett Favre and what he did, and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers now, that if you are healthy, you can play to a decent level, up until that age. So then why would the Atlanta Falcons go and draft someone that high in the draft? Again, as I said, if this was Spencer Rattler and you wanted to take him in the later rounds, like the New Orleans Saints eventually did, taking him in round 5, and you want to see him as the future quarterback and then that's absolutely fine. But to get the 8th pick and use the 8th pick on someone like, it just doesn't seem right. Again, if Kirk Cousins was 39 and you're thinking we can get a year or 2 out of him, then go for it. But at this stage, it just doesn't make sense. But as I said, the Atlanta Falcons seem to be doubling down on their belief that this was the right decision, with GM Terry Fontenot coming out with this statement: if you believe in a quarterback, you have to take him. And if he sits for 4 or 5 years, that's a great problem to have because we're doing so well at the position. Which is a statement and a sentiment, again, I can kind of understand on its own in a vacuum. And this sentiment and this idea would play out in maybe 70% of other quarterback situations. But it just doesn't make sense in this particular one with the Atlanta Falcons and with Kirk Cousins. Because you gave up so much for a quarterback that you think can win now with this team. And the Atlanta Falcons, as I said, are a team that I think can do well now that they have Kirk Cousins. They've got plenty of weapons. Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Rondale Moore. There are a lot of good players there that could win straight away. But as is the case with any draft, you may look at it and say, right, we have a team to win now, but what can we do additionally to that? Do we get depth at wide receiver? Do we get a star cornerback or whatever? You can make decisions to win right away, even if you are also thinking about the future. Which is why, again, maybe if they went another position, it would have made sense. But just quarterback, no. And you do have to wonder if this is something that Terry Fontenot really, if his job is going to be dependent on this. If it comes down to the Falcons do very, very well this season, but then they get to the playoffs and something goes wrong and a key player gets injured, for the sake of argument, let's say that Drake London gets injured, okay? Not that I want it to happen, but these things do. Would it then not be looked at of, right, why didn't you get another star wide receiver to work across from him rather than, Michael Penix Jr, someone for the future? It is something that I think is his job is going to be at stake as a result of this. If the Falcons don't end up doing well this season, because they are going to look at that and think, right, we could have had that developmental future quarterback somewhere in the later rounds, but we needed someone to help us right now. And that is something I think Arthur Blank might look at him and say, you did a bad job. We have a team that can win now. Why didn't you want to win now with your first round pick? Off you go. I genuinely think that he, not necessarily on the hot seat right now, but when the season plays out, I would not be surprised if that does end up being the case. So certainly a big gamble by the Atlanta Falcons, as they clearly seem to be doubling down on that effort, and we will just have to wait and see whether or not that decision plays out in their favour come the end of the season. Because I don't think this is going to be a long-term thing. I think this is something you're going to get a lot of reaction to in the immediate future rather than long-term down the road. So that's the Falcons dealt with. I'm pretty sure that is not going to be the last time that I'm going to be ending up talking about this rather horrible decision that they made. But we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, moving on. And moving on to news away from the NFL draft. And that is the news that, according to various reports, Mekhi Becton, the offensive tackle, looks set to sign with the Philadelphia Eagles, having been released by the New York Jets at the end of the last season. Now, I did say in my draft recap bonus episode on Friday that I was a little bit surprised that the Philadelphia Eagles went the way they did in the first round. Because, as I said, if you look at the way they have established themselves in the past couple of years, it has been in the trenches. It has been offensive line and defensive line. And I mentioned, the retirees of Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox that made me think, right, that's a way they should have gone. And they ended up taking Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback. Now, a good player, Quinion Mitchell. I'm not disputing that. I just felt and was a little bit surprised that they went down that road rather than making some moves on either line. But in fairness, they did eventually make those moves. They added a couple of players later in the rounds. Jalix Hunt, a defensive end in the third round, an offensive guard, Trevor Keegan, and in the fifth, and Dylan McMahon, a center, in the sixth. So again, trying to, as I say, you can't necessarily replace the likes of Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox right away or with one player. You might have to do it in an aggregate sense. So now that they've attacked those positions at depth, maybe they are going to be able to do that. But maybe they did have something up their sleeves this whole draft weekend and take everyone by surprise. Because I have to admit, Mekhi Becton, the signing of Mekhi Becton, I think is a very, very astute move for them. Because whilst they do have two of arguably the best tackles in the NFL right now in Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, as the two bookends, but at a position like tackle, I feel like this is something you really can't have enough depth at. And I just think this is a really, really smart move to have. Again, I've seen reports that Mekhi Becton is going to be their swing tackle and backup because, as I've said, the Philadelphia Eagles have built through the trenches, and if you lose either a Lane Johnson or a Jordan Mailata, then you are in a bit of bother. So to be able to get someone as solid as Mekhi Becton into your team to be that backup on either side, be it left or right tackle, I think is a pretty smart move. And the fact is, he's still very young. And whilst Lane Johnson is 33 and he does have a contract through 2026, you just never know when it might, though the toll might start to go on him. So you can slot him into Lane Johnson's position, time up for bring him in for a short period, and then have Mekhi Becton take over Lane Johnson's spot in the long term. I really do think this is a very, very smart move by the Philadelphia Eagles, and there are probably a lot more teams that are probably kicking themselves a bit and thinking we probably should have gone and grabbed him instead. Because especially when you look at the numbers, and I'm seeing reports out there of 1 year, $5.5 million for a player like Mekhi Becton is an absolute steal to have as your backup tackle. And again, at either end, he can play left, he can play right. So to have him sorted like that, I think is a very, very smart move by the Philadelphia Eagles. One of the better run organizations in the NFL, has to be said, and a move like this just sort of shows exactly why that is the case. Now, moving on from one franchise who is very well run to one who thinks it is very well run, and that is the Dallas Cowboys, who, according to reports, look set to re-sign Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Ezekiel Elliott, as everyone knows, was one of the best running backs in the league for a good 2 to 3 years, I would say, maybe even longer. And when you think of the Dallas Cowboys, that team of 2016, and that draft class of getting Ezekiel Elliott in the first round and Dak Prescott in the later rounds, and thinking that might be the bedrock of the franchise. For a sense, it was right, and they did look as if they were going to help turn the Dallas Cowboys around. And they did for a short period of time. Made the Dallas Cowboys competitive, won them the NFC East a couple of times. So there was obviously a lot to be done there. But as we have seen with the running back position, you need to capitalize and get everything. You have to win a Super Bowl before the position starts to take a toll on them. They didn't do that, and the position did take a toll. Because if you look at Ezekiel Elliott's numbers, these are his numbers in terms of yards per game, which I think is pretty important when it comes to a running back position. I think it's arguably the most important number when it comes to a running back, and just how much you use them on a per game basis. Okay, so he started off his career in 2016, 108.4 yards per game, which led the league. Then the second year, 98.3, again led the league. 95.6 in his third, then 84.8, 65.3, 58.9, 58.4, and then last season with the New England Patriots, 37.8. That slow, progressive decline is quite frankly staggering. And again, you can understand 1 year if you lose a key member of the offensive line and you drop down from 108 to 65.3, or maybe you were dealing with an injury at the start and then you were demoted to a backup role as you got back. You could understand a bit of a. For that level of decline to go on so progressively, it does make you wonder what the plans are for the Dallas Cowboys with him. Because if he's going to come in as the featured main back, which we presume he would, what makes you think that he's all of a sudden just going to spark and burst back up to even a number maybe in the 80s or the 70s in terms of yards per game? And even if you want to use him as, again, in an aggregate as a running back by committee role, then that number, you're not going to get the high level of production out of Ezekiel Elliott that you once did. And even if you do go running back by committee, it's going to take something incredible from the committee to make it work. Because if we look at the Dallas Cowboys, the running backs they have on their roster now, Snoop Conner, Malik Davis, Rico Dowdle, Royce Freeman, and Deuce Ford. These are pure running backs. They do have a fullback in there, but this is pure running backs. They've only managed 4 rushing touchdowns between them in the NFL. And now you're adding in Ezekiel Elliott. Again, not prime Ezekiel Elliott. This is very much diminished Ezekiel Elliott into that fray. There is no way that you're going to keep all of those running backs happy with the amount of touches that they have. Again, if you want to have Ezekiel Elliott as the featured main back and then just sprinkle in the other guys, you could kind of make an understanding for that. But if they're all going to be sharing it, whichever way you look at it, the signing of Ezekiel Elliott does not make any sense. And it really is a shame to think about it, but he's 28 at the moment. Again, he's been around for so long, you might think he's 28. But it just feels like Ezekiel Elliott's time in the NFL might well be over. Which really is a shame, because you look at the player that came out of Ohio State initially and that first season. He could have been, he was on course to be one of the greatest running backs that we possibly ever saw. He was on course for that. But to see that decline is just sad in a way. And again, whatever role you put him in, he's not going to be the same Ezekiel Elliott that he once was. And that's a problem. And don't just take my word for it. Richard Sherman, former NFL player, speaking on Undisputed this morning, said, referencing Jerry Jones' comments about being all in for this season, he said, if just getting Ezekiel Elliott is going all in, then it will be a rough year. And I think that's the truth for the Dallas Cowboys. Is whilst Jerry Jones can say all in, have the moves that the Dallas Cowboys have made really shown them to be all in? Is Ezekiel Elliott the main deal of the offseason going to really show that you are all in? I just don't think it does. And whilst the Dallas Cowboys might think that they maybe have a path to the division, with the Philadelphia Eagles going through their bit of a turnover, as it were, the New York Giants looking dysfunctional with Daniel Jones at their quarterback, and the Washington Commanders trying out a new rookie, whilst I think that the NFC East might be there for the taking, going beyond that and going into the playoffs and what have you, this Dallas Cowboys team just does not speak of a team that really is trying to be all in to winning a Super Bowl this year. And this is before, by the way, we get to the situation surrounding Dak Prescott and his contract and how much they're going to be able to pay him, what point they're going to pay him. Is it going to be before they can sign any more of these free agents or or they're going to have to wait until afterwards and maybe have to scrimp and save on giving Dak Prescott his money, because they know they have to pay people elsewhere. As I said at the start of the segment, the Dallas Cowboys might think that they are well run, but when you look at it, they just aren't. And for a team that's meant to be America's team and this great historical franchise, they really aren't living up to the level of expectations that not only Dallas Cowboys fans have, but I think we as general NFL fans have. You expect to see the Dallas Cowboys near the top. You expect to see the Green Bay Packers near the top. You expect to see the Pittsburgh Steelers near the top. But the Dallas Cowboys are the only ones that right at the moment don't look as if they're really trying to be back at the top. At least if they are, then they are going a weird way about it. And maybe this does prove to be some masterstroke and master plan by Jerry Jones and what have you, and this is all going to work out. But the way this is all planning out, at least on paper, it just seems like a very, very dysfunctional franchise that just doesn't seem to be able to get out of its own way when it comes to trying to garner some success. And now to finish off, just one lighter bit of story. I know this is where I usually try to talk about news that's outside the world of football, but I just can't not talk about this story that came out in the draft. And it concerns Buffalo Bills wide receiver Keon Coleman, who might just have had the best press conference moment in the aftermath of the draft. Now, Keon Coleman was taken in the first pick of the second round, so 33rd overall. But his personality, I think, is just absolutely incredible. Because if you saw his press conference, you'll probably know what I'm going on about. But if you didn't, basically he wore a big yellow fluffy warm coat essentially to his press conference, and a lot of people were, he was asked about it by one of the reporters, and where did you get that coat from? And he says he got it from Macy's for less than $100. But he sort of went even further than that and basically said that he's going to go and get more of them for that money. Now, just to point out, Keon Coleman, according to SpotRack, his rookie contract is going to be for just shy of $10 million, $9,995,000, a $4 million signing bonus, but he still wants to go and get his coats cheap because he said, I shop like my mum. I get my coats in the summertime. You've got to shop a season or two ahead just in case, and they'll be cheaper. So he just signed a contract for millions of dollars, but the first thing on his mind when it comes to coats is he still wants to be frugal with it. In my eyes, you see so many players that once they get that big contract, they'll just want to spend it on fast cars, big houses, or whatever. But the fact that he is still willing to say, nope, stuff that, I'm still getting my coat cheap, and he did say that he needs to get one in the same colour that he had in his press conference. He wants to get one in blue and red, which is obviously Buffalo Bills colours. The fact that he still wants to go and get them done cheap is just incredible to me. And I think that kid has got a nice head on his shoulders. I think that's going to be that is a kid to look at. I don't think you're going to see that one get into a lot of trouble further down the line, because that just that one line says to me he knows what he's doing. He's a smart kid. He's not going to be doing anything bad. Right, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for listening. And as I said towards the top of the show, if you are new, then feel free to like and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you are listening on. And also don't forget you can reach out to me and follow us on social media, which is at Baldwin Sports Media. And it's the same handle across TikTok, YouTube and Instagram. So feel free to, and Twitter as well. So feel free to reach out to me on those platforms if there are any topics that you would like me to discuss, or if you have any comments about anything I've said, feel free to reach out. And again, for those of you who are returning listeners, thank you very much for listening once again. So until next week, when I'm sure there'll be a plenty more draft fallout, I'm sure, news, player signings, trades, whatever, I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about, and I look forward to talking about it with you. So until next week, you guys take care.